Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Future Ready CMO Academy. Our community of marketers is grounded in the belief that the choices we make as leaders have the power to shape the future. Answering the call of these times requires a different level of learning, support, and growth. As a community of practice, we're committed to bringing fresh ideas and personal development opportunities to create change together. As we pass through the current meltdown of our economic system, climate change, and social upheaval, we're all concerned about the impact on young people. As leaders in turbulent times, we know how important emerging generations are to healing our planet and creating better socio-economic structures and ways of working. What will the future look like for them? We're passing on a big responsibility, and they know it. How do we motivate them, support them, impart our wisdom, and empower them to lead the way forward? Today, I'm really excited to finally have a chance to sit down with someone I'm proud to call a friend, Christine Heckart, CEO and founder of Zappa, who is also on a mission to make business a force for good around the globe. Christine and I bonded on a bus on our way to the airport from an empowered CMO retreat last year. Christine, I'd seen you many times and always had the urge to talk to you, but was a little intimidated, to be honest. After hearing your talk about the role money can play in shaping a more equitable, sustainable future, I knew I had to talk to you. We discovered very quickly our interest in alternative ways of thinking, the untapped potential of humans in business to make a huge impact on the future, and our shared belief that we need to unlock that untapped potential. As a longtime senior executive rising through the ranks quickly at companies like Cisco, and ultimately becoming a successful startup CEO, Christine has a lot of experience with talent management and development. Today, she's combining her tech startup experience with her vision to support the unique needs of emerging talent. I'm excited to hear more, and I invite our audience to ask questions throughout. Thank you for joining us, Christine.
Thank you, Mary. I look back on that day on the bus and I just thank the stars that I sat down there because I found a soulmate, and it was my lucky day for sure.
Thank you. That is, it was it was the highlight for me.
Me too.
So I would love to hear more about your journey, right? Like, you've had what most of us in tech would look at as a very traditional but high-powered career, and then here you are on the other side of that career trajectory, really starting something unique and new. Can you talk a little bit about your journey and how you got here?
Yeah, very quickly. I've spent 30 years in tech, and I came up through product and CMO at big companies and small, like many of you guys out there. I knew I wanted to be a CEO forever. Like, I always wanted, I prefer to be in control. I had a recruiter tell me in my mid-40s that had I been a man, I would have been a CEO years ago, but I'd probably never be a CEO. So I had to give that up. It took another almost 10 years before I became one. And I do thank my hot minute at Cisco for that, because you're sort of only as good as your last title and company. And when people are out looking for CEOs, for those of you interested, they do pay a lot of attention to the brands that you've been at. And like your most recent brand, you're only as good as your last title. But anyway, I got bored. I got my first public board seat in my 40s. I got my first CEO opportunity in my mid 50s. We had a great exit with that company. I feel very fortunate. A lot of things, lined up, and it was a lot of hard work. But because of that exit, then I had an opportunity to do a CEO thing again. And what I realized is I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to run somebody else's company. I don't want to work at somebody else's company. And I don't want to be in just tech. And if you are in that right now or anything else, it's no knock against it. Like, we all have to come up somewhere. And I loved my time, but I want to put 100% of my life energy and my money and my influence and everything else behind making the world a better place now. And I want to do that through business because I do believe business should be a force for good in people's lives. We spend more time at business than anywhere else. It can ruin people's lives and marriages and self-esteem, or it can really build them up. And, I think we're going into an age where business now needs to be a force for good. And I'm going to show you guys some data that says that it is in business's best interest to become a force for good. And so anyway, with all of that, I ended up founding a company called Zappa, and its purpose is to make each person on the planet better. You and I, Mary, would say we want to raise the vibrational state of the planet and all the people on it. For the average person, we say, we just want you to become your best self and live your best life.
Yeah. Well, you've come to the right place, because this is a community of practice that is really focused on making business a force for good. These are all, most of the people I think on this call, in fact, everyone that I'm seeing in the list of attendees is a marketer and very senior marketers. In fact, we have one just joined who's a very senior executive at a very a critical financial institution. So these are people who have, really are feeling a calling in really important positions in their business to do something better.
Awesome.
So
Welcome, everybody.
love that we're all here together. It's an exciting time to be alive. So let's talk about talent. And Christine, you brought some data with you today to share with the audience. So let's pop that up and let's talk about the state of talent and why we're here.
Okay. Yeah. And please, interrupt, ask questions. Mary, if you help kind of monitor the questions so we can stay on top of them. I'm going to go through some data and thoughts for you. I spend basically 100% of my time now thinking about how to engage Gen Y and Gen Z in the workplace and beyond. Now, I also sit on boards, both public and private. I've been in the C-suite like all of you guys for most of my career. In the last couple of years, here's the conversation that's happening in the boardroom. Why can't we just pay people to work anymore? Like, what has happened? And the truth is that you really can't just pay people to work anymore. If you ever could, it's not the way the deal is working now. A lot has changed. Most companies have a huge disengagement problem at the moment. This is most recent Gallup data. We are hitting all-time highs globally and in the US for disengagement and active disengagement.
And
most of your employees.
And it's accelerating pretty rapidly, right?
And it's accelerating. Yeah, it's getting worse, not better. It's costing a lot of money. This is just in the US, 350 billion just last year. So, it's a significant problem. It'd be good if we could do something about this. What's happening? And here's my take on it after spending 2 years kind of staring at the problem, talking to a lot of millennials and Zs. I'm going to give you some more data in a second, but when you and I, Mary, and the rest of you guys on this call were coming into the workforce behind, I was Gen X, probably a lot of you are Gen X, maybe some millennials. We were coming in behind the boomers. What you got out of work was money and title. That's kind of the deal. You go to work, you get money. If you're doing a really good job, you're going to rise up over time with your title. And if you got this other stuff, great, that was on you, but not really part of the deal. I think a lot of us found intrinsic motivation because we liked work, and that's why we stayed and we grew. What Gen Y and Gen Z expect now is really different. They do want money. Money is important, by the way, especially for stability. But they want good mental and physical health, and they want to know it's important to you too. Growth, personal and professional growth and development is their number one thing. I'll show you some data. and how you are paying attention to them and helping with their personal and professional growth is huge, especially for retention and engagement. But they also want time and autonomy. They want to know that they're working for a business that's doing good in the world and they are having impact and their own purpose and values are aligned with the business. They want transparency. They want to have good relationships. They want to be appreciated. They'd like to have joy at work. And frankly, I don't think they're asking too much. Like, business ought to be doing this. We spend so much of our lives at work. Don't we all want this deal? And, why are we not getting it? Why is going to work costing us our mental and physical health instead of promoting it?
Hey, Christine, real quick. Okay, there it is. Yeah, the slides weren't advancing for a minute, but now they are. Thank you.
So one thing to be aware of is 2 out of every 3 workers will be Millennial and Gen Z by 2025. Latest data from Gallup, again, 33% of your employees this year say they're going to look for a new job. 76% of your employees say they'd stay longer if you were investing in them personally and professionally. All of this is made more challenging and more difficult because of the remote and hybrid work, because of the distributed workforce, and because of layoffs. Like, trust has gone way down. Trust is big for employees in general, especially younger employees. And trust has gone way down because of the layoffs. And even if you're not doing it, they're seeing it. So they're nervous. Where do you guys come in as leaders? I'm going to lay a lot on you today about your job as a leader, and you're going to not like a lot of it. And you're going to be like, come on, like, really? Do I have to do all of this? And the truth is, yes, you do have to do it. And frankly, you'll appreciate it too. As you're doing it, you're going to become a great leader and you're going to feel good about yourself and the work that you're doing in the business and in these people's lives. So a good place to start is the purpose. If you're not the CEO and your CEO hasn't figured out the higher purpose for your business, how it really impacts the world and people's lives, then hey, as CMO, try to drive that. If you can drive that for the company as a whole, that's going to be good for you and your career. It's going to be great for your business. If you have a CEO who doesn't care about this and you can't drive it at the business level, at least do it for your part of the business, whatever your part is. Like, come up with your why. Why are people coming in? Why do their jobs have impact, not just in the company, but in the world? What's happening there? And if you can make that connection for people every day, your employees are going to be a lot more engaged. And you probably will be too. Appreciation's big, creating a culture of caring. And by the way, that starts with yourself. If you're saying one thing, oh, I want you guys to all have good work-life balance, and I care about your mental health and your physical health, but you're not doing it, they know, they can tell, and it rings hollow then, and they don't think you're serious. So if you haven't taken care of your number one stakeholder and asset, which is yourself, if you're not investing in yourself, if you're not giving yourself good self-care, that's a really good place to start. And then make sure that trickles through, because your words and your actions on this and anything else have to be in congruence. The number one place where leaders lose credibility is what you say and what you do in private is different. And it doesn't matter if it's on the self-care thing or just, if you say to somebody, oh, great job, team, keep going. And then behind the scenes in a smaller group, you're like, damn it, like, why aren't we further along, et cetera. Even those tiny private moments of discontinuity cost you credibility. So be really careful. Say what you mean, do what you say, keep the gap between those two, even when well-intentioned, keep that gap as minimal as possible. And then finally, and this is the place we're going to pay a lot of attention going forward here, is how you develop your employees. What you're doing to help them grow. It is their number one issue. They are scared to death of skill atrophy, and they all have side hustles going on. So if you want 100% of their loyalty, their engagement, etc., you focus on their development and you will get that. In fact, these millennials and Zs are amazing employees. They've got phenomenal ideas. They will be very, very loyal to you if they feel like they're getting a good deal. And that good deal is what we talked about before, and it starts with personal and professional growth. Now, where do you focus that investment? And it's not in hard skills. It's not making them a better marketer or a better engineer or a better finance person. You can do some of that and they will appreciate it. But the number one set of skills that correlate with their personal and professional success is soft skills. And I'm going to take you through what some of those are. But what we've seen is all businesses invest in soft skills for their people, but only the people at the top get that investment. So once you became an executive, you probably started getting leadership skills, and maybe you got a coach, and all this stuff comes out of the woodwork. And chances are pretty good that if you got to an executive level, you probably either had naturally or learned, like I did the hard way, how to develop at least some of these soft skills. You've got some of them, and then you got more and more resource. But imagine what would have happened in your career if you would have had them sooner. For me personally, if I would have had them sooner, not only would I have been better and probably risen faster, but I would have caused a whole lot less havoc in my companies, with my teams, with my coworkers, if I had better communication skills, better collaboration skills, higher self-awareness, higher EQ sooner in my career. And to Mary's point earlier, if we can help everybody with this, if we can kind of accelerate that wisdom, we all gain. We gain in the workforce, we gain in the company, we gain in the world and the community as a whole. So this is a really good place to focus, and everybody benefits and everybody appreciates. We've done a bunch of, I'll say research, but it's not our research. We've looked at everybody else's research and talked to tons of experts, and we've narrowed it down to something we call the high five. Now, this isn't the only thing to invest in your people on, but it's a really great place to start. So the high five is self-awareness, self-control, self-care, communications, and trust and collaboration. Trust and collaboration kind of go together hand in hand, because you can't collaborate well if there's no trust. If you can help your people and your teams with each of these are the high five for high octane performance. Teams and individuals who excel at these significantly outperform their control peer groups who don't have these. So if you're going to start somewhere, start here. And I'm going to tell you just briefly kind of what we mean by each of them, we being Zappa, but again, kind of just spending 2 years looking through all of the data and the research. Self-awareness is helping people really understand their own preferences in communication style, in particular in the workplace, personality typing, et cetera. But like, how does that then go? How does that manifest in how I communicate with you, how I work with you, and vice versa? And then also some cognitive stuff. In cognitive behavioral therapy, there's something called ANTS, automatic negative thoughts or tendencies. We have added something called PETS. If you really dig into psychology, it's almost all negative. There's very little positive psychology. So we've balanced out the ANTS with something called PETS, which are your personal empowering tendencies, those good things, good qualities you can call on when the ants make an unwanted appearance. If you can teach people how to recognize their triggers and those tendencies and intercept them before they become a problem, the tension and drama in your workforce is going to come way down, and their ability to collaborate and communicate with each other is going to go way up. So self-awareness is really important. A lot of you have probably done personality profiling. But usually inside companies, two things happens. One, it's only done at the top. Not everybody gets it. And two, whoever gets it, you get it for a day, you learn, you get some little report, it goes on the shelf, never to be seen again. So I can maybe remember mine, but I probably can't remember yours, let alone everybody's, and what I do differently when my style meets your style. So one trick is to get that information available at people's fingertips. We've done it with something we call zip tips, zip code and zip tips. Doesn't matter how you do it, but really important for people to understand who they are, who you are, whoever is on the other side, and how that communication style is going to match up. Self-control, you guys have it, or you wouldn't probably be at your level. We've seen that there can be a lot of assholes that rise to the top. But generally, by the time you get to the top, you've got good self-control. If you can teach this sooner, and this is a soft skill, happiness is a soft skill, gratitude, positivity, growth mindset, resilience. These are soft skills and they are highly correlated. They are part of self-control. And you can teach these things. You can teach people to develop good practices and habits, just like you do, Mary, right? How do we create practices that every day we are identifying self-defeating patterns and we're intercepting those and we're instead inserting positive habits that are going to be reinforcing of our best self at work and at home. So you're teaching self-control. Do I have to teach really? Do I have to? Yes, you do. You have to teach people these habits. Self-care, you guys all know what self-care is. Probably you don't do it well. The fact that you're on this call, I will give you big kudos for making an hour of time to invest in yourself today. That's huge. Make an hour of time every day to invest in yourself. Doesn't matter what you're doing. It can be a walk, it can be a workout, it can be a seminar. If you can do more than 1 hour, great. But an hour a day invested in yourself is the best return you will ever make. And that's true for all of your people too. So the more you talk about self-care as a leader to your people and what you're doing, and that self-care is both personal and professional, and it's a daily habit, that's going to resonate really strongly with your Gen Y and your Gen Z. And they're going to want to know what you do and how do you do it. Really emphasize the universal basis of self-care, which is sleep. When all else fails, protect your sleep and ensure that your people are protecting their sleep. Good nutrition, real food, not fake food. Movement, just move every day. We do some things, we do challenges and stuff in this little app that we built to just encourage people at the top of every hour to move their bodies. Don't just get stuck on Zoom and you're sitting all day every day. Like even on a Zoom, you can be moving your body.
So Christine, this one is one that I think those of us that come out of the Gen X world are really having to retrain ourselves around, because we were raised by boomers, and
Yep, that's right.
Our work ethics and our self-value is all about almost like how, much of a martyr you can be, right?
Right, 100%. How productive can I be?
There's such a conditioning change, and I just see it everywhere. I work with a lot of leaders in different kinds of business, and they're still valuing that burnout, right?
Hey, I do it. I'm running a company that is about this now, and I have to check myself. My husband would still tell you I'm a workaholic and I work round the clock. And in his mind, I do. But in my mind, and relative to what I used to do, I feel like I'm almost in a part-time job. Like I make specific time in the mornings and the evenings for self-care. Mm. And you guys have to figure out, like you say, Mary, we're all wired differently, but recognize your own judgments, because your Gen Y and Gen Z employees do not have the drive to consistently perform with that high work ethic in the same way you do.
And
And
you're
that's
not
hard.
modeling it. Yeah. And if you're not modeling it, they're going to be repelled by you, right? Because it
Yes.
just is not what
Yes.
they want to
Yes.
see in leadership.
Right. And you can be authentic about it, like this conversation, to say, you know, I was raised by boomers. My own self-worth is highly tied to productivity. If like, for me personally, if somebody walks in the room and I'm not busy working, or if I haven't sort of gotten all my checklists done during the, I don't feel good. But being able to articulate that to your people, saying how you're working on it, saying that's an important thing for you and you're practicing, that gives them permission to be imperfect as well. They might be imperfect at different things, but this is what you're working on. Your Gen Y, Gen Z think of their mental health in the same way our generation started working on physical. You know, back in the 80s, when people started jogging, the boomers were like, you're doing what? You're like going for a run just to run? Why? You're going to the gym, you're working out. Like, we said we're going to work on our physical health. And that was sort of a new revolutionary thing. For Gen Y, Gen Z, it's not just physical, it's also mental. They are all going to therapists. And if it's not a paid therapist, they're checking Dr. Google every other day. Mental health is a big thing for them, and it's good. None of us really probably had the best mental health. And why not be better at this and other things?
we got a lot of catching up to do, and they're kind of also showing the way in a lot of ways.
Right. And you have to be tuned in and recognize it, but you can be authentic. You don't have to pretend you're perfect. Vulnerability works well here. The last two foundational elements in the high five are communication. We suggest listening, like we have something called the 5 levels of listening, but however you teach listening, there's a great book called Talk RX. If you've never read it, it's by Dr. Neha Sangwan. It's an amazing book. And then she also teaches in that same thing, the 5 levels of agreement. If things are not happening in your company, like balls are dropping, missed expectations, people getting frustrated, it's these two things. And particularly understanding when you really have an agreement with somebody. And then finally, trust. And if you as the leader do one thing, you've got to establish trust in your organization. Organizations can't work well without it. We all know that. We've all been in toxic environments where trust is low and nothing good happens there. So trust starts with roles and making sure that everybody understands their role and what's expected of them. And you as a leader, you don't have to define everybody's role, but you have to make sure everybody's role is defined and that they're clear about it. And then the other elements of trust are affinity. Do we get each other? Do we belong? Affinity is a huge, even if all this other stuff fails, if you really get me and I get you, we give each other a lot of leeway. So super important in trust. And by the way, affinity happens less in the workplace and more in those extra things that you're doing outside of work with each other, so that you get to know each other on a personal level. That bus ride you and I took together, Mary, right? Just those few minutes, our affinity in the way we see the world is very similar. And so trust just goes right, like it doesn't matter all this other stuff that might be different. Our trust with each other is high because we know we see the world in the same way. Competence. A lot of Gen Y, Gen Z don't realize that they are constantly assessing and being assessed unconsciously for their competence levels. And we do that as humans all the time. Can you really do this? Can I trust you to do it? Reliability, are you going to follow through? Again, they aren't necessarily making that correlation. So they'll drop the ball on something and won't realize the implications of that on trust. So just helping them understand. And integrity. This is what we talked about before. Are you walking the walk, or in these small private moments, are you sort of saying something that's a little different or acting in a way that's a little different? Be aware as leaders, and all humans should be aware, there is no such thing as blanket trust. You don't trust. I don't say, oh, I trust that person with my life. Now, theoretically, yes, but if they're not a pilot, you're not going to trust them to fly you. We trust people situationally based on what we know they're competent at. And for me personally, there's all kinds of things that you can trust me with. And there's a laundry list of things. You do not trust me with my own calendar. I will screw up the calendar. You don't trust me to make my own airline reservations. I will show up at the airport on the wrong day, going to the wrong place. So you can trust me with a lot of things, but there are certain things you can't trust me with. Trust is not blanket. And people have to understand that, and they have to have good skills for what to do when trust breaks down, because trust always breaks down. We're human. There are going to be times when we don't live up to our expectations of each other. And that's when trust breaks down, and what do you do with it? If you can teach these things in your organization, talk about them, be clear about them, the performance of your organization will go through the roof. And if you're wondering, do I really have to teach all this stuff? Yes, you do, because it's not taught in schools and the business isn't teaching it. And if people don't have all of this, do you think you have a high-performing, happy organization with loyal, engaged employees? Rhetorical question, but so I'm going to tell you why this is a good idea. Actually, let me go to this slide first. Here's some data. You guys are probably familiar with the S&P 500. That's the red line, and that's the performance of S&P 500 companies since 2000. The next line up is the good to great companies. I believe one of the best books of all time is Jim Collins' Good to Great. And these are companies that substantially outperformed their peers. And there were reasons. And oh, by the way, remember that purpose thing? Purpose was a big one of those. Now there's two other sets of companies that substantially outperform good to great. One is companies with high ethics, and that's the blue line. And the last, the yellow line, is conscious companies. Companies with a conscious culture, often called stakeholder. So I'm going to tell you what that looks like here. There's 4 big things that make up stakeholder companies or conscious companies. They have a higher purpose. They integrate all stakeholders in decision making. And what this means is when you have a big decision to make, you don't just, as a company, think about shareholders, the people who own the company. You're not just thinking about the top bottom line. You are integrating the well-being and needs of all stakeholders, which includes employees and their families, the company as an entity, your customers, your partners, your suppliers, your shareholders, long-term shareholders, and the world in which you operate, the communities, the environment, the planet. When you make a decision, if you are consciously advocating for the best decision that balances the well-being of all of those, and you're going to make trade-offs. Sometimes you have to do a layoff. It's going to hurt some employees for the better of the whole company. But if you're transparent about those trade-offs, why you're making the decisions and how it is benefiting the majority of the stakeholders, all balanced, you will have an outperforming company and your employees will trust you. So be transparent about that stakeholder balance. And then finally, those last 2 things is what we were just talking about: conscious leadership and a conscious caring culture. If you can do these 4 things, you are one of these companies that outperform.
So this is
not that hard.
It isn't. And what's interesting, though, is that when you see what's happening in our government and the anti-ESG, the corporate initiatives around, triple bottom line companies, stakeholder capitalism, whatever you want to call it, we know that it is that this is true. There's so much working against that in our government, in large unethical corporations. And, in my mind, sometimes it feels like, oh, we're just like, playing a losing game. But if the approach that you're taking is about really activating and harnessing the mindset of these Gen Y and Gen Z, who are going to be the workforce of the future, Does that increase our potential to have an impact on larger government initiatives that will make it more possible for purpose-driven companies, stakeholder capitalism to be the norm versus the exception?
Yeah, so I'll just personally take government out of it. Yes, government has this, ESG, it's not even really good. The SEC, right, has this checklist on ESG, and it's good and bad. Anytime you have a checklist, it's good and bad. But the whole reason that business has to step up and become more of a force for good in the world is because governments are ineffective, and they've proven to be ineffective, and the trust of business is at all-time lows, but the trust of government is even lower. And so what you're finding with the Gen Y, Gen Z is they don't trust business. Gen Z in particular is a very, very cynical generation. They don't trust business, which is why you have to work so hard when they're in your company to earn their trust individually with you as a leader and with your business. But in general, they don't trust business. However, they do believe that business can and should be a force for good in the world. And if you can bridge that gap, going back to purpose and so forth, you will have loyal employees. That's one good thing. They'll be very engaged. You'll get a lot out of them. And if you look at this data, you'll make more money. Like, it's better for the company to do this.
Right. Right. And
so I want to do a time check, Mary.
Yep.
Do we want to, there's, some more stuff I can show, or do we want to get out of this and just go to Q&A? You tell me.
Well, we've got about 7 minutes left. I just want to be, let folks know on the webinar that, feel free to ask questions. Love to hear what you're thinking about this. And, if there's anything that you'd like to hear from Christine prior, I would love to get into some of the folks that you have supporting you in this, because I think that's really, really interesting as well. And I'm sure people are curious about some of the methodologies that you're using.
Yeah, so I'll tell you how we, just very quickly, how we do it. So one of the things I'm doing at Zappa is we're building a mobile app. And it's a mobile app that allows every employee to take full accountability of their own development by giving them access to these amazing authors and experts, stuff that usually is reserved for the elite in the world or in the company, packaging it up into tiny little bite-sized daily practices. So you only spend 10 minutes a day, but every day you're building. So instead of it being, like one time a year you go to a leadership class, every single day you're just getting a little bit in across all of these different areas. However you do it, you don't have to do it the Zappa way. Zappa tries to make it fun and short, bite-sized, but however you do it for your people, there's amazing experts in the world at this soft skill stuff, and it resonates really well with your Gen Y, Gen Z. It'll resonate with you too. Inspire them with something every day. And remember, it's the TikTok generation. So these long form books and videos and so forth aren't as impactful as just quick little 5-10 minute engagements with them, but touch them every day. And if you touch them every day, it will build, and you will end up over the course of a few months with a completely different and more engaged culture and workforce. That would kind of be my bottom line.
And it's really interesting to me, over the last several years, I've noticed that people that are in therapy or are working on their own personal development, they don't often talk about it at work. But if you do something as a team collectively, like my team has gone through a couple of these kinds of exploratory developmental kind of programs together, it starts to bond you over your own personal development, personal growth experiences, and gives people something to talk about that's more meaningful than the latest episode of Succession, right?
Right.
And you get that sense that you're growing together. You're not just growing as an individual, but you're watching other people and hearing about their journey of growth as well on the team.
So I see a note from, hi, Trisha, great to see you out there. I just saw a note from her saying she couldn't see the slides. Could people see the slides?
Yeah, it kind of resolved halfway. Okay. It resolved right after she
okay, great.
Made that note. So anything that people can do today to kind of up their game here as leaders, Christine?
Well, it starts with you, right? Investing in yourself, walking the walk, talking the talk, self-awareness, self-control, self-care, strong communications, building trust. And then I would say these soft skills, 85% of a person's success, both in life and in business, are from soft skills. So if you're going to invest time and or money in something for your team, invest it there. You will have the biggest outsized performance or impact from that investment.
Great. Any other questions from our audience before we wrap up here?
Was this valuable for you guys? I can't see all of you. I can see the chat. Like, is this helpful? Are you already doing it? Are you not doing it and struggling with how to do it? Like, I'd love to just hear. Thank you. Tricia says helpful.
Here's a question from
Fan
Dan.
of Tricia, so I'm not surprised that she's probably already doing some of this.
Here's a question from Dane. How hard do you think we can or should push on a person for those near an office? Is that about how much should we pressure people to come into the office?
Yeah, none of the things I talked about actually have a correlation. You can build very effective, highly engaged, really productive, distributed teams, hybrid teams, or in-office teams. Whether you're in the office or not is not correlated with the stuff we just talked about. Now, that doesn't mean you might not want to get people in the office. You know, there are definitely some advantages, especially people getting to know each other better, and that affinity, you know, if that can be enhanced in the office for sure. But regardless, you can be helping people with the high five and more, you know, like this gratitude. Happiness is a skill. Positivity is a skill. Growth mindset is a skill. If your people have those, we kind of put them under self-control. But if your people have those things, you're going to have a more resilient, loyal, impactful workforce. Positive, the 3-to-1 positivity ratio, which we didn't get into on this, that's a whole different sort of hour discussion. But if you show up as a leader with authentic positivity, a 3-to-1 or better ratio of positive to negative, not veering into toxic positivity, that is another huge correlator with outsized team performance.
One, I think, last really compelling question from Wendy. How do you get CEOs on board?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of my missions is actually to take this out and make CEOs more aware. We at Zappa are partnered with something called the Conscious Business Leaders Academy, CBLA. It was started by Raj Sisodia, who's the founder of Conscious Capitalism, also called Stakeholder Capitalism. You know, anything you can do to get your CEOs plugged into that movement, and not the checklist ESG stuff, but really understanding that there's an outsized performance for their business if they're running a conscious company and acting like a conscious leader. And some people it's going to resonate with really strongly, and others it's just not. It's not in their DNA. But even if your CEO isn't, doesn't mean you can't be. And you can influence an entire culture. I don't care who you are or where you are in an organization. If you show up as a conscious leader, I promise you, it will have ripple effects through your team, through your peer group, through your company.
Awesome. Christine, this is great. Really, really great way to start the week. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. One really quick announcement for this community. I know very many of you have joined this community to imagine the future together and the role that marketers can play. We have our next Future Ready CMO community gathering coming up in June. We sent out a doodle poll. If you have not filled out that doodle poll to let us know when you can make it, we will be assigning a date. It's going to be somewhere towards the end of June. Would love to have your voice in the community. We're going to be working on work streams and really getting the community activated and moving in a positive direction towards making some significant changes. So really glad that everybody could make it on a Monday morning. This recording will be available in the next few days. Christine, thank you so much. And that is zappa.com, and Christine's LinkedIn profile is here as well if you'd like to get in touch with her. And I hope you have a great week.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mary. Bye.